A new beginning. Emma Rodriguez pressed her palms against the cool metal of her new locker, taking a deep breath as the unfamiliar sounds of Riverside High School echoed around her. The crisp mountain air in Millbrook, Colorado, felt different in her lungs compared to the constant drizzle of Portland, Oregon. Everything here seemed sharper, cleaner, and infinitely more intimidating. At 16, Emma had the kind of quiet athleticism that came from years of disciplined training. Her lean frame was hidden beneath a simple gray hoodie and dark jeans, and her long black hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders. Her dark eyes held a quiet intensity that most people mistook for shyness. Starting mid-semester had been difficult enough without having to decode an entirely new social ecosystem. Back in Portland, she had been just another face in a diverse crowd of 2,000 students. Here, at Riverside High, with only 800 students and its tight-knit community dynamics, being the outsider felt like wearing a neon sign. It was already October in the Rocky Mountains, and the trees outside painted the world in brilliant oranges and golds. But Emma barely noticed the beauty as she navigated the maze of hallways in her new school. The bell rang, signaling the start of the first class. She had just made it into Mrs. Anderson's English class when the attention of 28 pairs of eyes turned to assess the newcomer. She felt the familiar flutter of anxiety in her stomach, and Mrs. Anderson's voice carried across the room as she introduced Emma to the class. "Class, we have a new student joining us today. Emma Rodriguez has transferred here from Portland, Oregon," Mrs. Anderson said. "Emma, would you like to tell us a little about yourself?" Emma stood awkwardly beside her desk, a shy smile playing on her lips as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm Emma. My mom and I moved here because she got a job at Millbrook General Hospital. She's a nurse." Her voice was steady, but she could hear the whispers starting up around the classroom. "City girl probably thinks she's better than us," she heard one student whisper to another. The usual assumptions. But none of them knew what Emma was capable of. Beneath her unassuming exterior lay 8 years of intense karate training. From the age of 8 to 16, Emma had spent every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday morning training at Sensei Williams's dojo in Southeast Portland. What had started as her mother's attempt to help her defend herself from bullying had evolved into something much deeper. Emma had earned her first-degree black belt at 14, and just 6 months before moving, she had tested for her second-degree black belt. Sensei Williams had taught her the true meaning of strength, not through hurting others, but by protecting what mattered most. Chapter 2. The First Signs of Trouble. The day passed uneventfully until lunch. Emma had learned to blend in at her old school, keeping her head down and avoiding unnecessary attention. But today, it was different. In the cafeteria, the football players ruled the center tables. Their Letterman jackets and easy confidence made them the kings of Riverside High's social hierarchy. Jake Thompson, the football captain, stood in the center of it all, his blonde hair perfectly styled and his posture commanding attention. As Emma passed by, she overheard Jake and his friends laughing about a freshman who had gotten into trouble on the football field. Maybe if he spent less time with his little girlfriend and more time in the weight room, he wouldn't be such a disappointment, Jake said. Connor Walsh, one of Jake's friends, added, "Speaking of disappointments, did you see the new girl? She looks like she shops at thrift stores. Probably can't even afford real clothes." Emma's jaw tightened, but she kept walking. She had dealt with bullies before. Ignoring them had always worked best, letting them pass by without further confrontation. It wasn't until she got to the lunch line that things took a turn. Connor, with his wiry red hair, stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Hey there, new girl," he sneered, his voice carrying enough volume for the nearby tables to hear. "Jake wants to talk to you." Emma's instinct was to walk away, but she knew better. Turning down the invitation would only make things worse. She had learned in Portland that sometimes, you had to stand your ground. "I'm fine where I am, thanks," Emma replied, maintaining a calm, controlled tone. Connor stepped closer. "Jake doesn't like being ignored," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "When he wants to talk to you, you go talk to him." Emma's mind raced as she glanced around the cafeteria. The eyes of 400 students were fixed on her. She was the center of attention now, and she knew that whatever she did next would define how things went from here on out. Chapter 3. The Moment of Truth. Jake Thompson had been expecting Emma to back down, but she didn't. When Connor reached out to grab her arm, Emma didn't flinch. Instead, with a smooth and fluid motion, she twisted her wrist, using his momentum against him to break free. Connor stumbled forward, his grip slipping as Emma calmly stepped aside. Cafeteria fell silent. The entire room seemed to be holding its breath as Emma, the new girl, stood there with unshaken confidence. "I appreciate the invitation," she said, her voice steady, "but I prefer to eat my lunch in peace." Emma walked past Connor, heading straight for a seat with Sophie Chen, a quiet girl she had met earlier in the day. As she sat down, Sophie looked at her with wide eyes. Did you throw him?" she whispered. Emma nodded. It's all about timing. The tension in the room was palpable, but the rest of lunch passed without further incident. Jake Thompson's crew sat at their table, no longer laughing. Jake's eyes followed Emma, his mind clearly working through what had just happened. Emma had just embarrassed him in front of the entire school, and he wouldn't forget it. Chapter 4. Rising Tensions. The next day, Emma overheard Jake and his friends talking about her in the hallway. This Portland girl thinks she can come in here and act all high and mighty," Jake said, his voice full of venom. "We'll show her how things work around here." Emma's stomach turned. She knew what was coming. She had seen this kind of thing before, and it never ended well. Later that day, as Emma walked toward her next class, Jake's voice rang out from the courtyard. "Hey, freshie," he shouted at a younger boy who had just taken a photo of Jake and his friends. "Did you just take a picture of me?" The boy stammered, looking terrified. No, I was just texting my mom." Jake snatched the boy's phone out of his hand, scrolling through it with exaggerated care. "What's this?" Jake asked mockingly. "A text to your mommy saying we're being mean to you? Well, maybe your mommy should pack you a new lunch, because you can't handle the cafeteria food." The bullies laughed as the freshman's lunch was knocked from his tray and spilled across the floor. The boy fell to his knees, trying to clean up the mess, tears brimming in his eyes. Emma's hands clenched into fists. The familiar surge of anger flooded her body, but this time, she knew better than to react immediately. She remembered Sensei Williams's lesson: your greatest victory will always be the fight you don't have to fight. But as the freshman boy continued to cry, Emma couldn't stay silent. She had to do something. The fight for justice. Emma stepped forward, her voice calm and controlled. "That's enough," she said, making her presence known. The cafeteria quieted as Jake turned to face her. Jake's smile was thin, filled with arrogance. Well, looks like someone's feeling brave today," he sneered. "I've seen enough," Emma said, her voice unwavering. "You don't get to treat people like that. Not here, not ever." Jake's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Emma turned to the freshman, offering him her hand. "Go home. This is over now." But before the boy could move, Connor stepped forward, blocking his way. "Nobody leaves until Jake says so," he growled. Emma didn't hesitate. With a simple movement, she shifted into a stance that surprised everyone. "Move," she commanded. Now. The tension in the room could have been cut with a knife. Jake watched with an expression of disbelief as Emma stood her ground. She was no longer the quiet, timid new girl. She was someone who had learned to fight for what was right, no matter the cost. In one swift motion, Emma sidestepped Connor's lunge, using his momentum to send him tumbling to the ground. The students around them gasped in shock. This wasn't the girl they had expected. The aftermath. Jake and his friends retreated, their pride wounded. Emma had shown them that she wasn't someone to be intimidated. As the crowd began to disperse, whispers filled the air. Some students saw Emma as a hero, others saw her as a threat. Later that day, Emma met Sophie, who gave her a knowing look. "You've just made the most popular guy in school your enemy," Sophie warned. Emma sighed, but she wasn't afraid. She had stood up for the bullied, and that's all that mattered. She would face the consequences head on, just as she had been taught. Chapter 7. The True Strength. As Emma walked home with her mother that evening, she reflected on the day's events. She had promised her mother that she would avoid trouble, but sometimes, trouble couldn't be avoided. Sometimes, standing up for what was right meant risking everything. Emma's mother, Maria, knew something had happened. She had seen the tension in Emma's eyes, the way she held herself differently. But when Emma shared the details, Maria listened quietly, understanding that her daughter had done what was necessary. Emma had faced bullies and stood up for those who couldn't defend themselves. She had fought not just with her hands, but with her heart, learning that true strength wasn't about overpowering others. It was about having the courage to protect those who needed it the most. And as Emma settled into her room that night, she knew that this was only the beginning of her journey. The battle for justice wasn't always easy, but with each challenge, she grew stronger. The ripple effect. Emma woke up to her phone buzzing with text notifications. As she opened her messages, she realized that the entire school was buzzing with the news of her confrontation. Sophie had texted her first, "You okay? People are saying crazy things about what happened." Emma sighed as she scrolled through the messages. Most of them were from people she didn't even know, but the comments ranged from admiration to disbelief. Some students praised her for standing up to Jake Thompson and his friends, while others mocked her for being the new girl who had no place challenging the social hierarchy. "Did you really just throw Connor like that?" one text read. "You're like a secret ninja." Despite the praise, Emma couldn't help but feel unsettled. She had gone from being the quiet outsider to the subject of gossip, and she wasn't sure if that was a good thing. At breakfast, Maria noticed Emma's distracted demeanor. "You don't look like yourself," she said, her concern evident. "I'm fine, Mom," Emma replied, though she knew her mother could see through her carefully guarded facade. She just didn't want to add to the worry. "It's just, the school's been talking about me a lot." Maria frowned. "You know, sometimes standing up for what's right can come with consequences. But you've always had a strong sense of justice. I know you're going to do just fine." Emma appreciated her mother's words but felt the weight of what lay ahead. Would standing up for the bullied freshman make her a hero, or would it lead to more conflicts she wasn't prepared for? The test. The tension in the hallways of Riverside High was palpable the following day. Every student seemed to be whispering, eyeing Emma as she walked past. She could feel the weight of their stares, and it made her stomach twist in knots. At lunch, Emma sat with Sophie, trying to ignore the way the room felt different. The football table, once full of confident chatter, was quiet, with Jake Thompson staring her down from across the room. His expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something that told Emma the storm wasn't over. "Jake's not happy with you," Sophie said softly as they ate. "I know," Emma replied, her voice steady. "But I didn't back down, and I'm not going to." Sophie hesitated before speaking again. "I heard from a few people that Jake's planning something. He's not the type to forget." Emma's heart sank. She had expected Jake to retaliate, but she didn't know how he would strike next. Would it be another public humiliation? A fight? Or something worse? As if on cue, Emma saw Jake stand up and start moving toward her table. Her pulse quickened. Sophie looked up nervously, but Emma just took a deep breath. She had been trained for moments like this. Moments when things seemed impossible, but confidence and control were her best allies. Jake stopped a few feet from Emma's table, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can just waltz in here and act like you own this school?" he spat, his tone laced with contempt. Emma stood up slowly, meeting his gaze with calm determination. "I didn't come here to own anything. I came to learn, just like everyone else. But I will stand up for what's right, whether you like it or not." Jake took a step closer, his friends standing behind him. Emma could see Connor's clenched fists and Ryan's unsure expression, but Jake's smirk remained, as though he was waiting for Emma to break. "You know," Jake began, his voice lowering, "you might have thrown Connor and Ryan off today, but that's not going to save you forever." Emma didn't flinch. "I don't need saving. I'm fine on my own." Jake smiled darkly. "We'll see about that. You might want to rethink how you approach things around here. Millbrook's not like Portland. People here don't take kindly to outsiders trying to change the rules." The showdown. The days that followed were filled with whispers and sideways glances. Emma knew that Jake wasn't going to stop until he got what he wanted, her submission or her defeat. She had trained for this moment, but now, facing it head on, she wasn't sure how it would unfold. One afternoon, just before the final bell rang, Emma overheard Jake and his friends in the hallway again. They were talking about a meeting that was going to happen after school, and Emma knew it was no coincidence that they had planned it for when the teachers would be gone and the hallways would be empty. Her heart raced. She knew this was it. Jake was going to confront her in a way that would force her to make a choice. She decided to face him on her terms. That afternoon, as Emma walked through the empty hallway, she spotted Jake and his friends waiting for her near the lockers. Jake stood with his arms crossed, his usual cocky smile replaced with something colder, more calculating. "I knew you'd show up," Jake said, his voice low and menacing. "I didn't think you had the guts, but here you are." Emma felt the familiar stillness wash over her, her mind focused and her body ready. She knew what she had to do. "I'm not here to fight you, Jake," she said, her voice clear and firm. "But I'm also not going to back down. This ends here, one way or another." Jake scoffed, but there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. He hadn't expected Emma to be so calm in the face of his aggression. "You think you can just walk away from this?" he asked, taking a step forward. "I'm not walking away," Emma replied, her voice unwavering. "But I won't fight unless I have to." Jake's eyes darkened, and without warning, he lunged at her, trying to shove her into the lockers. But Emma was ready. With one swift movement, she sidestepped him, using his momentum to spin him around and push him against the lockers. The move was quick, calculated, and precise. Jake stumbled, surprised by her agility and strength. His friends stood by, unsure of how to react, but Emma didn't give them a chance to intervene. "Leave me and my friends alone, Jake," she said, her voice steady. "I'm done being your target." Jake gritted his teeth, glaring at her as he pushed himself off the lockers. For a moment, there was an eerie silence as the tension hung in the air. But then, to Emma's surprise, he took a step back, his pride wounded but his resolve not completely broken. "This isn't over, Portland," Jake said, his voice quieter now, more calculated. "But for now, you win. Enjoy it while it lasts." Aftermath and resolution. The next day at school, Emma walked into the cafeteria with a sense of calm. The buzz about her confrontation with Jake had spread even further, but now, instead of fear, there was a sense of respect. Her standing up for herself had earned her something more valuable than the grudging admiration of her peers. It had earned her peace. Jake and his friends stayed away from her. There were still whispers and sideways glances, but Emma no longer cared. She had made her point. She wasn't afraid of them. And that made all the difference. Sophie approached her at lunch, her eyes wide. "You're really something, Emma," she said. "I don't think anyone at this school expected you to stand up like that." Emma smiled, but there was no arrogance in it, just quiet satisfaction. Sometimes the best fight is the one you never have to fight. But sometimes you have to show people what you're made of. From that day on, Emma knew that she would face challenges, not just from Jake but from the world around her. But she was ready. She had found her strength, not just in her martial arts skills, but in her ability to stand up for what was right, even when it wasn't easy. And with that, Emma Rodriguez's true journey began. The weight of fame. The weeks following Emma's confrontation with Jake Thompson felt like a blur. Word of her actions spread throughout Riverside High like wildfire, and Emma quickly became a topic of discussion in every corner of the school. Some students admired her for standing up to the bullies, while others viewed her as a threat to the social order. Emma knew the stories surrounding her were exaggerated, but it didn't matter. Walking down the hallway, Emma could feel the eyes of her classmates following her every move. Whispers filled the air, some mocking, others filled with awe. She could sense the divided opinions about her. Some people, like Sophie, were supportive, while others kept their distance, wary of being associated with the outsider who had disrupted the natural hierarchy of the school. One morning, as Emma made her way to her locker, she saw a group of girls from the cheerleading squad whispering and pointing at her. They weren't subtle about it, and one of them, a blonde girl named Carla, shot her a scornful look. Emma could feel the tension rise in the pit of her stomach. She hadn't intended to make enemies, but it seemed that her actions had forced her into that role, whether she wanted it or not. She tried to ignore them, but the harsh words followed her. "I heard she thinks she's better than us," one of the cheerleaders said loud enough for Emma to hear. "Just because she's a black belt doesn't mean she can walk in here and change things." Emma held her head high, determined not to let them get under her skin. But as the day wore on, she couldn't shake the feeling that the small victory she'd earned had come with a heavy price. Old friends, new rivals. The tension between Emma and the popular kids at Riverside High wasn't just confined to the cafeteria anymore. During gym class, Jake's friends, Connor and Ryan, made sure to cut her off at every turn. Every time she passed them, one of them would say something just loud enough for her to hear. "Isn't it cute how the new girl thinks she's a hero?" Connor would chuckle. "Too bad she's just a loser who can't stay out of other people's business." Emma's patience was wearing thin. She had managed to avoid conflict as much as possible, but these little jabs were becoming unbearable. Her sense of justice was flaring up again, and she knew it wouldn't be long before she had to confront them again. During a particularly intense gym session, the coach had paired Emma with Connor for a series of drills. It was obvious that Connor was still bitter about what had happened in the courtyard. As they squared off for a simple basketball drill, Connor deliberately bumped into her shoulder, hard enough to throw her off balance. Emma fought the urge to retaliate. Instead, she focused on the game, trying to keep her mind clear. But as the game continued, Connor kept taunting her with little pushes, testing her control. "You're not so tough without your little karate moves, huh?" he said, smirking. Emma took a deep breath, keeping her stance steady. "You don't want to do this, Connor," she said in a calm voice. "If you want to play basketball, we can. But if you want to test me again, I will defend myself. I don't want to fight you." Connor's face twisted into a sneer. "We'll see about that." At that moment, Emma realized that standing her ground wasn't enough. She had to find a way to stop the cycle of tension. She couldn't let every minor incident spiral into a major conflict. Sophie's secret. Emma had been struggling to balance her schoolwork, karate practice, and the constant social pressure. But through it all, Sophie had been her one constant source of support. Emma appreciated Sophie's quiet nature and how she always seemed to understand when Emma needed space, yet knew exactly when to check in. One afternoon, as Emma sat in the library, working on a chemistry assignment, Sophie joined her, looking unusually nervous. "Hey, Emma," Sophie began, her voice hesitating. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you." Emma looked up from her notes, sensing that something was off. "What is it?" Sophie lowered her voice, glancing around as if she was worried someone might overhear. "Jake, he's not the only one who's been targeting you." Emma furrowed her brow. "What do you mean?" Sophie took a deep breath. "I overheard some of the other girls, cheerleaders and a few of the popular boys, talking about how they're planning to make your life a living nightmare. They're going to start spreading rumors, get people to isolate you. They think if they break you down, they can take away your credibility." Emma's heart sank. The idea of becoming the subject of cruel rumors wasn't something she had expected. "What do they want from me?" Sophie shook her head. "I think they're just trying to show that no one can challenge the social hierarchy here without consequences. They want to teach you a lesson. But I think you already know that." Emma nodded slowly. The realization hit her that her battle was far from over. She couldn't just stand her ground in one confrontation. It was going to take more than that to break the cycle of bullying. "Thanks for telling me, Sophie," Emma said softly. "I won't let them win. I've already fought for what's right once, and I'll do it again."